Your mic is always on. We turn everyone else's off, but we leave yours on.
I don't like mic.
That's in trap. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting being held on August 3rd at 7 p.m. at 250 North Main Street, Centerville, Utah. Let's see, make sure that we can conduct the business of the meeting by doing a roll call, starting on the end with Councilwoman.
Meekum is here.
Kewen, present.
Ince, present.
Ivy present.
And
Fillmore here.
Fillmore, thank you. All five are present, so let's,
Here.
or by Zoom. So let's start with a prayer thought by Councilwoman Fillmore.
Yes, thank you. Our most gracious Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunity to meet together as citizens of this great city of Centerville, this great state of Utah, and the United States of America. And we're thankful for our freedoms that we enjoy in our system of government, and the fact that the foundation of the health of that government is individual involvement. And we're so thankful for not only our involvement here in this official capacity, but all of our citizens' involvement in being informed, in being a good neighbor, in reaching out to the underserved and those in need, in helping in times of crisis. We're grateful for this great blessing to live in such a community that has that citizenry. Please bless us tonight as we work on the city business, and as always, with thy spirit of wisdom and cooperation and kindness and diplomacy. And these things we say in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilwoman Fillmore. If you'd all rise with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're now at the point of the meeting at the open session. This is an opportunity to anybody that's in the audience or joining on Zoom to be able to share any concerns, appreciation, whatever might be on their mind. We just ask you to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. You can come up to the mic here. I'll look to Jennifer to see if anybody's online, and so that's now available. And you'll see on your screen the dial, and if you're dialing in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone. I want to say this is my first time in the chamber here. It's a beautiful building. You guys are quite professionals. I've been living here for the last 21 and a half years. I moved up from San Diego. I'm a retired Navy career flyer. I now fly for a major airline. I love this community. It's a beautiful single-family home community. I've tried to keep out of politics. I have been watching my taxes, my water bills.
Your name is what?
My name is Dave Flowers. I'm sorry.
Great, Dave.
I live at 1470 600 North. I'm here, just another issue popped up, and I hate to put my business in here, but I'll go over it. So I've been here in the last 22 years in Centerville, and I've seen a lot of different things happen during elections between politicians trying to get elected. Some was good, some was bad. But I've never seen anything like what was happening this last week. I really wish I wasn't here talking. What I want to know from my city council is why did the mayor's initiative, Centerville Cares, a city program, host re-election video for the mayor and 2 city council candidates on his Facebook page? Seems to me, and probably others, that's using city programs for re-election campaigns is wrong and should not be tolerated. It looks very much like the mayor used city property for personal gain, and it's not sitting well with me as a longtime resident. Here, or in California, or Pennsylvania, or other 7 states I've lived. As I said when I introduced myself, I'm not particularly comfortable with public speaking. As you can hear, I'm studying. And it's really hard for me to be up here. But I felt something had to be said. What I expected from my local government is honesty, fair play in elections. What I'm seeing this election is not that. Centerville Cares is supposed to be about suicide prevention and mental health, not a booster for the mayor's reelection bid. Tonight, I asked the City Council to investigate if the support Centerville Cares gave the mayor was legal and how you are going to prevent city property from being used as elections in the future. You guys have done an outstanding job. It's been a hard job to maintain this community as well as it is. I wouldn't want to be in your position. So I want to thank you for your time on this issue and any futures going forward. Once again, thank you.
Get your comments, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Any further comments? Anybody online? Jennifer? Okay. Then I will close the public, or the open session, and we'll go in.
Before we go on to the business, I want to address what Mr. Flowers has brought up. Mayor, I have a few questions for you. Number one, has Centerville Cares put in a 1023 for charitable nonprofit status with the IRS?
I'm not going to undergo an interrogation right now.
Mayor?
When we just have an open session, I'm not going to undergo an interrogation.
No, Mayor, I think it's
Okay,
appropriate.
that
It's
is-
been brought
no,
up by the public.
I will address Dave Flowers. I will address you guys, but I'm not undergoing an interrogation right now.
Okay, well, I'm still going to speak.
Councilman McEwen, you're out of line.
No, Mayor, it
Yes,
is a
you're
matter
out-
that's been brought up by the
you're out of
public.
line.
Okay, Mayor,
You're out of line.
I think since you're the subject of this, you may have to let the pro tem do his duty and you recuse yourself and let the council talk about business that's been
An
brought
open
up.
session is historically for people to come and report information, not to start discussion. We
No,
never
it
have
is.
discussion.
Actually, it is. It is a matter that's been brought up. I
George?
have a few questions that I want to get off my list so that I understand where things are
Councilman
at.
Fillmore?
Yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, well, I think maybe I'd like to defer to Lisa on this, but really the open session absolutely is for us to hear from the public, and our full discussions should be agenda items. This is not an agenda item. And so if you have a concern and want to add it to a future meeting to be an agenda item, I think that would be appropriate.
Tammy, I don't accept
you have an
that because we
opinion on that?
we often discuss issues after a member of the public has brought it to us. We ask for clarification. We also give staff instruction.
Any more than a couple of sentences makes me feel uncomfortable every time we do that. We really should only be listening in open session. And so we usually give maybe 1 or 2 sentences at the most response to the citizen to let them know they've been heard.
Well,
But we don't have a full discussion on something.
I have a differing opinion on that, Tammy. As an individual directly impacted by that message, I feel that as a council member, I'm concerned. We've had a member of the community bring it to us, and since we are in the midst of an election, and there has been a question about the use of city property, which arguably that's probably not the direction I would like to go. I just need to understand how this has happened in our city, how we have used Centerville Cares for this purpose, to electioneer for a candidate. And I think it's appropriate that it be discussed at this point.
I'm not arguing that it's not appropriate to be discussed as a council. I'm saying it's not appropriate at this time because it's not on the agenda.
I think it's very appropriate because I intend to ask for staff instructions.
We list these items on the agenda 24 hours in advance. This is an open session to air comments. This is not an agenda item. We can schedule another meeting and make this an agenda item. And I'm more than happy to answer. As you've
Then that's fine.
As you have plotted over the last week in getting the media here and everything else, I deserve that same respect to plot as well too, if that's what you're doing here, okay?
You're accusing me of plotting?
We're moving on to the agenda items, okay?
Okay, Mayor, I think that I am requesting that, okay, Lisa, please.
Actually, there is a statute regarding this, so typically anything on the agenda has to be described with reasonable specificity. But we do take public comment during this open session. And the statute does say that generally we're not going to talk about anything unless it's on the agenda, but at the discretion of the presiding member of the public body, a topic raised by the public may be discussed during the open meeting, even if the topic raised by the public was not included in the agenda or advance public notice for the meeting. So the basis for this statute is that if we're going to talk about something, the public should know that we're going to talk about it, but it also has a practical application of allowing staff to be prepared or other people to be prepared. But anyway, so in my opinion, I do think that whether or not this is discussed pursuant to the statute is up to the mayor.
Great. Mayor, if you'd like to shut down the discussion, that's fine, but I will immediately request an emergency meeting within 24 hours' notice to fully discuss this item because it is germane to the election, it is germane to the future of Centerville Cares, it is germane to the future of the Community Foundation because all of them are involved. And I think it is extremely unfortunate that Centerville Cares has used its nonprofit status to go out and electioneer in this campaign. And because of that, I want all of those items available on an emergency agenda so that the council can talk about it and give instruction to staff because we have to pick the future as legislators for community care, for the Centerville Cares, for the Community Foundation, and what impact that has on the election. Because they are all interlinked. And I understand you're upset because you're the focus of this, but it is inappropriate to shut this down and not readdress this immediately.
I am only upset because I am here to do the business of the people, and the business of the people is on the agenda that was given to the people 24 hours in advance, and that is what we are going to discuss.
Great. Then I respectfully request that we meet in 24 hours to address the issue brought up by Mr. Flowers relative to the use of Centerville Cares as its nonprofit status and its promotion of the mayor's reelection campaign. I think that is appropriate. I would make that as a formal motion.
I don't hear any response to your motion.
This is different from anything that we've seen, and I'm not sure what the appropriate action or response is. 24 hours is probably not enough time because Lisa or Jennifer have to post, and that has to be 24 hours. So I think the issue needs to be resolved, but doing it within 24 hours, I don't think it's
Fair enough,
possible.
yeah. So within the statutory posting requirement.
So, yeah, I believe that you've asked for a meeting, and I would support that we need to have a meeting and resolve the issue. I think that there are problems created. So I think it should be directed to staff to post a meeting, and we'll have a meeting sometime in the next 2 or 3, 4 days, subject to some degree to people's schedules, because I at least would have some difficulties depending on when it is.
Yeah, we always check on availability, so we'll check on availability and see what day will work. Let's move on to the business of the meeting.
We have a motion on the table, Mayor. We need to come up with a time. This cannot go beyond the primary because the damage is being done in the community right now. And I do not think it's appropriate to just say, let's wait till some future point that's indeterminate as to when we're going to deal with this issue. It is inappropriate, and I think we need to, as a council, determine what that schedule is and put it out so that it's noticed now and that we can move forward. And if you feel that you were about to get interrogated, I will submit any questions I have so you have proper time to prepare them with legal counsel or whatever you need. I was asking a simple question. I didn't think that you would take it as an interrogation. But apparently you have, so I'm fine moving forward.
I took it as it is not on the business of the meeting.
No, you started barking. You
It's
started barking.
It's not an agenda item, and you came in here behind closed doors, bringing in the cameraman and everything else, without even letting any of us know in advance, unless some other people in here knew. There was a sneak attack by you.
Okay.
Which is
Mayor?
to me is not appropriate.
Mayor, there's no
I mean,
sneak. There's,
I will be out in the open and I will tell people what's going on.
That's
I'm not
great.
going to bring in a sneak attack to pull a surprise.
There is no sneak attack, Mayor. Let's schedule the meeting, and then let's get it all out in the open, because right now, this is just barking between two individuals, and all we're doing is degrading the meeting. So let's pick the date, let's put it on the calendar, and let's get everything out in the open, because at this point, all I see is you're barking at me, I'm barking at you, we're getting nothing done. The business of the people does need to get done, but this also is the business of the people. So let's get the date on the calendar now, and then we can move on. That's all I am asking.
In terms of procedure, we still need a second, or
I'd
perhaps if you'd like to,
second.
Bill
I
second.
think, I'd second it. I think it needs to be
if
resolved.
you'd like to amend it, I do appreciate, I don't think tomorrow night is enough time for staff to post this unless we left right now.
That's what I said, is I do second that we need to do something, but I don't see it reasonable to expect you to post anything before tomorrow morning, tomorrow noon, sometime tomorrow. Now, if that's not enough time because the city manager is out of town, I understand that. George's comment about the need for timeliness is significant because the date on the election is still 10 days away. No, 8 days away.
7.
It was a week from today.
7 and half
Okay,
an
you're
hour.
right, a week from today.
So,
So what we have, Lisa, is we have a motion and a second, right?
right, and my concern is the motion is to hold a meeting within 24
Okay,
hours.
so I will revise the motion and say, I would like to motion that we meet on the issue brought up by Mr. Flowers on Friday at 5 PM or Saturday, schedules dependent, in the morning.
In my mind, that's not reasonable, and I would support that.
So that's a second.
Okay, so it's a motion and a second, so we have a vote, right? Okay, vote. Councilwoman Meekum, how's that, what's your vote?
Aye.
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 Councilwoman Fillmore?
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I can now.
So that motion passes 5-0. So staff, I guess, look at schedules and see which time works. Okay?
Yeah,
All right.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, if there's any direction or in preparation that staff needs to be aware of to prepare for this meeting, we would greatly appreciate it. Doesn't have to be shared in this meeting, but if you give us a heads up what you anticipate staff needing to prepare for this meeting, that would be great.
Brent, so we can move on with the business of the meeting, I will send you a list of legal questions for Lisa to review.
Thank you very much.
And I need to see those in advance as well.
I think obviously,
We all ought to.
There will be posted, I anticipate that anything I ask Lisa, unless it is covered under the client-attorney privilege, will be posted with the notice as an attachment.
All right.
So we're looking at schedules, or I'm free either of those.
I'm out of town all this next week.
Friday at 5?
Friday at 5.
What if I'm not available?
are you?
I'm not available on Friday at 5.
Saturday morning.
Not available Saturday morning.
Is there a time within the week that?
I'm
within several
out
days that you are
of
available?
town all next week.
And I'm out of town as well, too.
Then I suggest that
Saturday afternoon?
Saturday afternoon then.
I'm out of town.
That sounds rather coy, Mayor. Are you really out of town or just
I
out of
am
town
out
because
of
it's
town.
convenient? So this is why, I think that since we're in the meeting and it has been discussed, if you want to discuss it, that we're still in the meeting. I think we could, I would be totally happy if we cover all the business that is in here and then return to this agenda item, non-agenda item, but public clamor item at the end, then we're all still in the same meeting. Then we can handle it. Then we don't have to worry about all these schedules, but I'm not going to play games for an entire week on this. This is ridiculous. I think that the citizens are owed more than that.
What about
The
Thursday?
citizens are also more, doing it tonight when the citizens have no opportunity in advance does not work either, Councilman.
Well, to me, there should be nothing that we discuss that wouldn't be a matter of straight facts, one way or another. It's very straightforward to me. I don't know that there needs to be a lot of prep in this, one way or another.
Staff's happy to try and coordinate that. I mean, the motion is to either have a meeting Friday at 5 o'clock or Saturday morning, so we'll just try to arrange for a quorum, and we'll get it done.
That'll work.
Well,
Okay.
does Thursday work better for people? Because in theory, a notice could go out tomorrow and you could meet Thursday.
I could do Thursday before 6 or after 7:30.
Then, Bill, if you want to remotion it, I don't have a problem doing that. If it's
Well,
Thursday,
let's find out if
Saturday,
people are available first.
I can do Thursday. I can change things around. This is important enough to do that.
I can do Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
You're really open on the
Really
schedule.
open. I have no life.
I'm hard and fast, 6 to 7:30, I have to drum. There are no other options. So, everything else you
And
can have.
I'm 100% unavailable Thursday. I may possibly be able to do a Zoom the other times. I'm not sure yet.
But a quorum can attend on Thursday? Does that seem reasonable?
I cannot be here in person.
On Thursday either?
Yep.
Well, since there wasn't any interrogation planned, if you're remote, it's not a problem. I had one question for you. That was if Centerville Cares had filed a 1023 with the IRS looking to adopt nonprofit charitable status. So other than that, I think it's just an open discussion.
So what time did we decide on?
We're still,
Well, we don't have a motion that supports a Thursday, but if Thursday works, then I'll motion it, or Bill or someone needs to motion that.
well, but trying to get,
If we could
So
do
there's
like
essentially your-
7:30 on Thursday. I don't know. I'm sorry, but I have
No,
a
so I
concert the
don't-
following week. I have to practice.
I don't think that's the issue. The mayor's not available on Thursday. Do we want to do Mayor and Tammy remote? Can you be available at any time on Thursday? Or is Friday better, or is Saturday better?
Probably remote is the best this Saturday morning. Is that what we talked about?
That was one of the original
Saturday, yeah.
alternatives.
So if we do Thursday, there's a quorum, and everyone can be, who's not
He said
here,
he can't do Thursday.
not even remote? Okay.
He said the best thing for him remote was
I
Saturday.
can't do remote Thursday.
So how about Saturday morning, or 11 a.m. Saturday? Does that give everyone enough opportunity?
I will make myself available.
Okay. Mayor, it's your call. 11, Saturday?
Are you there, Tammy?
Yes, I cannot do Thursday at all. I can try Saturday. No guarantees.
Okay, it sounds like that's the best option. All right, can we move on now? Let's go to item number one on our agenda. This is the, open session. There was nobody else, right, Jennifer? Okay. Go to item number one, the general obligation bond election for cemetery bond. Nate, come on up. So Nate's been working hard, Zion's been working hard, and they're going to present this obligation bond. So take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. As Mayor mentioned, I'm joined here with Marcus Keller from Zion's Public Finance, and he will have a chance to address you a little here shortly. So tonight you have before you a resolution regarding the general obligation bond for the purchase of a new cemetery. Just for backgrounds, City Council directed staff to pursue a ballot proposition for the upcoming municipal election to obtain input from voters on whether to bond for a new or expanded cemetery. In June, this past month, the city entered into an agreement with Zion's Public Finance for municipal advisory services for assistance and financial services regarding the proposed ballot proposition and bonding for the cemetery project. So tonight, with the resolution before you, you are essentially setting the parameters of the bond that would be placed on the ballot this fall. Zion's has provided the city with 3 potential general obligation bond scenarios with terms of 15, 20, and 25 years. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution with a term of 20 years. But if I may, I'd like to turn the time over to Marcus to discuss some of the numbers and the terms behind, or the numbers behind each of those terms.
Marcus, thanks for being here again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. I must have done a good enough job to get invited back, I suppose. So today, as Nate explained, we are adopting, or we propose the city to consideration of adoption of a resolution that would initiate the bond election process for this general obligation bond. As Nate discussed, as part of this resolution, it includes up to $7 million to be used towards a cemetery project. The kind of the understanding of the general obligation bond is it really does 2 things. Why you have to go to an election is you have to get a majority vote on this, but it creates a new revenue stream for the city through a property tax that would be assessed to the residents within Centerville City to pay for this project. So this would not be an additional burden on the city, but it would have its own revenue stream attached to the bonds, and as soon as those bonds pay off, that revenue stream would go away. And so what we're looking at today, as Nate pointed out, as currently part of this resolution, we've included terms pertaining to a 20-year bond, or 21. We like just a little flexibility, but we have it structured for 20 years. And this would basically have a tax impact on those that would have the obligation or the right to vote on this at this next election. And so today we're asking either consideration to vote on one of these scenarios, or just to, if we need to tweak it, we can do that too. But so we have a 15, 20, and 25-year tax impact summaries that we've done on it. I'm happy to go through all 3 if that's what you would prefer, to tell you which one would be, or if you have questions at this point on the general obligation bond in general, I can stop and answer those really quick as well.
I have a question. Is there a penalty if we pay it off early?
So the way that we're planning to issue these bonds are probably in the market, since it is a large enough issue that and a long enough term that you would get the best rates in a market. So you would receive a rating, there would be an underwriter involved, and then you would issue the bonds to the basically national market. People could bid on it and so forth. Currently, what we're seeing in the market is usually a 9 to 10 year call feature on that. So it would penalize you, or you would have to pay the interest through those first 9 or 10 years, regardless if you paid it off early or not. Now, if the council is worried about the call feature and potentially wanting to pay that off early, we could do different ways of sales with more flexible call features. But the one thing to consider about paying this off early is that, and I understand your question, because as you sell the lots, you're going to potentially get some revenues. So we may want to consider what we would call direct purchase, where we place it maybe with a private bank and they have more flexible call features with anticipation of paying those off early. The one thing to consider, though, as you're doing GO bonds, is the revenue coming in it's going to be kind of an annual. So you can't assess more than what would be due for that year, and you'd have to do that year over year. But again, with the cemetery project being a little different than typical project, which wouldn't generate revenue, then there may be a cause to look at a different structure. But right now we're running it currently 10-year potential call, and then after that, it would leave you open to pay it off early after 10 years.
So if we took a 20-year loan, we could pay it off in 10 years without a penalty?
Correct. Once you get to that call date, you could either refund it or you could pay it off in full without penalty. And, even if we if you knew kind of a rough estimate, and this doesn't lock you into that structure, just so you know, we have lots of flexibility on the terms and so forth when we issue the bonds. But once you get to that call feature, whether we choose a 7, 8, 9, 10-year call, whatever we end up deciding to do, then you could pay it off just the principal without penalty.
Does that make a difference in our interest rate when our call is?
It would. So typically, the shorter the interest rate, you're going to pay for it a little bit more in yield, or a higher interest rate for each year you cut it down by.
But a 20-year would probably be a 9-year call.
Yeah, we could usually do 8, 9 years. Well, I'll say 9 years is getting more common without penalty. But, you know, if we start getting below that, you'll probably see a few basis points for each year after that.
You know, I haven't seen, in talking to people, I haven't had anyone balk at the numbers, but it seems like if we're looking at potential future users of the cemetery and the lifespan of the cemetery, that the 25-year seems like the more reasonable approach, because that, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, you did a few of the studies on our capacity for the cemetery if we do this, right? In terms of like, my question is, with the $7 million, if we spend that on cemetery land acquisition, what do we end up with in potential lifespan, usable lifespan of the cemetery? 30 years, 50 years?
Well, I think the estimate that we came up with was just for the initial cost. And I think that they were planning on about $300,000 per acre. So if you had a 5-acre site, you might be $1.5 to $2 million for the property. And then we were figuring about $10 a square foot for improvements. We were figuring maybe, $3,000 to $5,000 for improvements. So that's where we came up with the 5 to 7 million range, 7 kind of being the top end. But that does not include ongoing maintenance.
I think what he's asking is, how long are we going to have property to bury people?
If I can step in, Councilor McHugh, and this goes back to when we established that policy. If we have a pretty strict policy as we do now, then it'll last forever. But if we open it up and allow anybody to buy up to 8 lots or 8 spaces right now, then we could sell it out pretty quick. So that policy we established, once the voters approve it, will be critical in determining that lifespan of that cemetery. My proposal would be, as we generate revenue from selling of these spaces, that number one, we replenish the perpetual care fund. So we are using only the interest to maintain the property, but potentially also establishing a capital improvement program that has funds set aside for potentially buying new cemetery land in the future. Now, again, we haven't gone into those details yet because we were kind of asked not to go into those details. And we want to hear from the voters first if they're interested, but the lifespan will be dictated by that policy that's generated by council.
Right, so I'm just trying to align the two, like the length of bond roughly overlaid with useful life, so that we're not, paying this off early or we pay it off late and we've already run out of space and we're looking at rebonding. It seems to me that in the 25-year case, we're fine with the policy.
The items we looked at in recommending the 20-year was that 10-year refund callback. We thought that was great halfway through the cycle. But if you also look at those numbers, the interest rate for even a 20-year is approximately $2.3 million. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but you're paying $2.3 million just on interest alone. And so if we extend it out another 5 years, we're going to be paying a lot more interest. And so again, just trying to be mindful of that debt that we'll be incurring. So, but nonetheless, 25 years, and that's why we asked to have those numbers put together, because we thought, well, we might need to go out 25 years just to keep that property tax payment for each home lower, but we'll be paying for it in interest for sure.
Sure. I guess the reason I'm kind of advocating for the 25-year is in this specific banner year of so many tax increases taking place all over the county, it seems that if we want to have a successful bond issuance, that the lowest tax number we can get is probably going to be our best chance of success. So
I agree.
That's where I'm headed on that.
I agree with that.
So if you did authorize the 25 instead of and I would actually suggest 26, just so we could have that flexibility, because sometimes the way the dates line up. But so if you did do the 25 compared to the 20, the tax impact as reported would be what they would see on the election is that $66 roughly for 20 years or $56 annual impact for 25 years. And then that's for a primary residential, 400,000, as well as 121 for a business at 400,000, compared to 102 for a business at the 25-year mark. So you would see, like you said, it would show better, and if we structure the bonds that way, it would be accurate.
Couple of questions. Your $400,000 number is probably unrealistic, especially in light of the things that we're seeing today. Are the numbers dependent on that $400,000 relationship?
Yeah, so where we got the 400, the number that the county gave us on our market value for our homes is 414. So the average home in Centerville, according to the county, the market value is 414,000.
Is that tax roll value or value?
That's value. So then tax roll would be 55% of that. So that's the assessment given by the county. And so for ease for Marcus, we gave him the 400,000 as a rounding number.
That number doesn't make much sense based on the other things I'm hearing in the marketplace. Now, if you were to tell me that was
That number,
actual,
Councilmember Ince, can be anything we designate to be. Marcus in our meeting also stated we could just say it's 100,000 to give someone a sense of what that amount will be per 100,000. So that number can be shifted or changed in whatever way that we determine that we want to value it. So if someone lives in a $700,000 home, they can do easy math and say that times 7 is what my property tax amount will be. So whatever council wants to change that number to, it doesn't change necessarily how the formula works. It gives some people a better idea what that property tax will be, though. So if council wants to change that number, I don't believe Marcus would have any issue with that if you want to throw a number out there.
I'm just trying to understand it. Should the number be changed? I guess I'd have to look at the math to see whether or not I thought it made sense, but the $400,000 number doesn't make sense to me.
So if you increase the number, then the impact's going to go up, of course. If you decrease the number, then it would go down. We try to base it off some semblance of fact, so that's why, Nate gave us that 413 number. Again, it's harder if you're going to go to the ballot and you see 413 trying to, do the math in your head. In this case, if they see 400,000, they can say, okay, I'm going to divide that number by 4 and then multiply it by, 5 or 7 or 8, however many hundreds of thousands they think is kind of their home's property's worth. But, this would include, a lot of townhomes, other different lower end or low income housing and so forth would actually be lower than that, right? So we try to just get a middle ground there so that everybody can kind of feel, oh, if I'm a little bit below, then obviously I would have a lower impact, or if I'm above, then I would have a higher impact.
So we could put a certain number per 100,000 and then people could figure it from there. Instead of going 400,000, it could be,
This much per
$15 per 100,000. And then
It gets a little dicey when you do that, though.
Because it would really lower the tax impact, and we're trying to be as
no.
clear and forthright as
Wouldn't that be-
possible.
No, it's
But you
just
said divide
it's just
it.
doing the math for them, just not by saying, instead of saying per average 400,000, if we say it would be this much per 100,000 of your home, then we've just done that preliminary step of the math for them, and they can do the multiplying of their own thing. I don't see that it changes the impact any.
So
We've
that,
just made the math easier for them.
so what they would see too associated with that 400,000 is they would see, the $66.76 or the $56.46. If you put 100,000, then that new number would reflect the 100,000 impact. And I 100% get what you're coming from. Let's just make it easier for them. But just based off kind of what we've seen done across the state, I would think someone would suspect that the city's trying to lower that impact number, and they would probably get a little upset about that. That's just from what I've seen. Even though I understand what the intention is to help them say, hey, it's 100,000. Just multiply this by the amount of your home, and you'll get to your mark. But we can't put that in the ballot language. We only can put the 400,000, and then the the impact
We're
assessment.
locked into pick the average and go with that.
Well, it's not necessarily that you have to pick the average, but again, we try to base it off something like, we could easily stand by that and say, well, the county gave us a 413 number, we just rounded it down 13,000 to get to 400,000 for simplicity's sake, but again, I think the 100,000 might raise some eyebrows at like this state auditor level, or somebody, Howard Stevens or whomever kind of monitors these type of elections. So
What if we just went with 500,000, since it's above what the county provided, and you should be able to back out of that for your home?
yeah, we can, that's fine. I mean, that's very close, or, just the other end of the spectrum.
It just makes me a little nervous to go to that if it's not, I mean, like he said, it is condos and townhomes. If that really is our medium, I don't want it to look worse than it is.
Well, I'm almost wondering if, because to me, that's almost outside the context of this resolution, because that's the education piece and the outreach. The resolution really is that we're agreeing for the purpose of the bond and the date of the public hearing. So I think we've got time to deal with that. I mean, really, from my perspective, I think we're okay to motion to, accept the resolution as it is. And then, like we're talking about now, work on the education piece between now and October and have something that we can agree is presentable to the public.
There'll be a voter information pamphlet that the city can put together that'll give just basic information, and then, as part of that, we could put a scale on there that says 100,000, the impact would be here, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to $1 million. And so somebody could very quickly look at that, put it to their home and say, oh, well, I'd be around here. So we could absolutely put that in the voter information pamphlet, and that could be what they use as a tool to know what theirs would be about. But yeah.
Well, then I would motion that we adopt resolution 2021-31 as presented.
I've got, okay.
Oh, sorry.
You could second, we have further discussion if you want.
I'll second it with further discussion.
Further discussion?
So, number one, you still haven't, I've still got significant issue with the 400,000. The 400,000 is representative of tax valuation, not property valuation. And that is totally dependent on when the last time was that the city, or that the county, updated the values on the tax roll for your house, correct?
I believe so. Nate would have that based off the 413 number.
So they update that annually.
No, they don't.
Yeah, the number
They update it on a rotating basis annually, because I've been to the hearings.
Okay. I should say, for the truth and taxation hearing, the number that the county gave us for our average market value for a home is $414,000. So where this is property tax related, we felt it would be
So that's what
similar.
I'm trying to understand, just by pure happenstance, okay? Notices came out last week, and my value was 414, okay? Everything that I've seen and talked about says that my value is significantly more than that. So I'm trying to understand, I'm really not trying to be a problem, I'm trying to understand, because I think it's based, because if you come up with a tax rate, and that tax is going to be assessed based on the valuation in the tax register, not what you think your home is worth.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. And so this 414,000 that the county gave us, that is the taxable valuation.
Okay, that's where I was trying.
What you can sell your home on market will most
totally
likely be
different.
much different. But the taxable value that the county gave us is 414,000. Is that?
The other question that I have, and maybe I have just been totally missing things, but I didn't know this was an approval election. I thought this was a sentiment election to see if there was interest in going forward. Have I totally misunderstood?
I think so.
No, this approves the bond. It's not a ballot question, it is a bond issuance.
But it was, do you want to approve this bond for acquiring cemetery land?
I did not understand it that way. Okay, that's fine, I did not understand it that way. I thought it was looking for resident. inclination, yes, let's do this, as opposed to an absolute approval.
Yes, let's do this, and if you say yes, there's this bond that's going to be put in place.
Of course, mitigating factors in the land, there's plenty of things, I mean, it
It
gets
could
to
still
staff,
fall out
yeah.
of bed, I
It could
understand.
still fall out,
Yeah.
so.
Any further discussion?
There was some discussion about the 20, in the resolution, there's 21 years. There was some discussion of going to 26. So just want to make that clear, and also want to advise the council that the 400,000 is in the resolution. I do advise to go with what staff is recommending, as well as Zions Bank. I think I'd rather go with standard industry practice. The statute, the obligation under the statute is to just provide notice of the tax impact to your electorate when they go to this. And I think that what they're advising is standard practice on that valuation, rather than having your electorate, calculate theirs. We're just going with the average. So
Okay.
anyway, I just want to make it clear that the 400, if you approve this resolution, the $400,000 language is in here, so you don't have that choice later. And also, if you want to address the 21-year versus the 26.
So then I would like to withdraw my motion and motion that we approve. We're going to make sure we get this right, Lisa. Thank you for the corrections. Resolution 2021-31, and that we make an amendment to, that's in the let's see, where is that again?
Well, both of those are on page 7. They're probably
yeah.
throughout, but just say throughout.
Amending 21 to be 26 years.
And the
And
associated,
recal,
and the associated tax impact with that.
And the associated tax impact, right?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Further discussion on that? Let's vote. Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Entz.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Fillmore?
Aye.
My motion passes 5-0. Before we move on from this, Nate, I had asked you, and I think you put it in your cemetery profitability analysis. I'd said, I want to see what this is going to return us before we throw this on a ballot. And I gave you a schedule from a local resident, and you took that and you put some numbers together. So you want to report on that?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Jennifer, can you pull that up? I believe it's an attachment, the cemetery profitability analysis. So how we looked at this, we looked at our current fees for our cemetery, which you'll see on the left. And then we knew that per acre, or an acre is equivalent to about 43,500 feet. And then I talked to Bruce Cox, our parks director, and he said that for each plot in our cemetery, it takes up a 4x10 space, so 40 square feet. So on this analysis we did, we looked at the maximum number of plots available per acre. So that's what you'll see on that top portion. So you can see that per acre, the maximum number of plots available is 1,089. With our general fund revenue, with the fees as currently stated, that would give us a total of just over $1 million per acre. And then the perpetual care, we would receive 326,000 per acre. Now we know that we can't just have a cemetery that is just open. There are going to be roads, there's going to be most likely trees, possibly a monument of some sort, flagpoles, etc. So we worked with Bruce, and I forget the number off the top of my head. I think it was, the road was about 20 feet wide for a cemetery, and then we have to have a 4-foot buffer on either side of the road, so about 28 feet. Brant and I went through and looked at our current cemetery. and looked at just the size of the roads and the amount of roads that it takes up. And it came out to be between 20 to 25% of our cemetery that the road takes up. So that bottom portion, the cemetery with roads and infrastructure estimate, I feel like that's a more realistic view of what we could potentially earn from our cemetery. So that brings our plot numbers down to just over 800 plots per acre, about 817,000 of general fund revenue, and about 245,000 for our perpetual care revenue. As I think Brant mentioned earlier, policy does play a role in these numbers. So, you know, these are numbers that if we were to sell everything right now all at once, this is what we would get. Most likely, we're not going to sell everything at once, and it will be phased in over, 30, 50, 100 years. So just that policy of how much we decide to hold for immediate need burials versus pre-selling burials right off the bat, that would determine how much revenue we would gain annually. But for now, at least this number would give you an idea of what we can expect to earn per acre.
And this assumes current fees.
Current fees. And I will note, I included a different file, the cemetery fee comparison for a residential single burial out of the southern Davis County municipal cemeteries. So Bountiful, Farmington, and Kaysville are the other cities that have cemeteries. We currently have the highest rate for a residential single burial.
And are these all single depth plots, or are they double?
We could go double. Again, that I would, maybe Kevin or Bruce knows better, but I would assume the location of the cemetery would play a role in that.
It would depend on the land.
Yeah.
One potential location wouldn't allow us to go double depth. So it will be dependent on where we locate the land, and if we could go double depth, we'll encourage it, of course.
Yeah, so the fee analysis does assume just a single burial. That gives us a conservative projection. Obviously, if we have a weekend burial, that increases our revenue, or if we have a double depth burial, that'll increase, but those are all unknown. So I just went with the conservative single burial space.
Brant?
Yes, sir.
For some reason, I was thinking that the perpetual care amount was on top of the purchase price, not part of the purchase price.
It's part of the purchase price, so you pay for both at the time of the purchase of the plot. It's treated differently in the terms of the space you purchase goes into the general fund. Perpetual care fund is then taken to a different account and maintained differently outside of the general fund. So anytime that we make, and Jacob could correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but if we're making as we purchase new equipment or we pay for the maintenance crews, we transfer the funds from the perpetual care fund into the parks fund to pay for that, into the general fund to pay for the maintenance of the cemetery.
But Brant, if you came in to buy a plot, isn't it 600 for the plot and then a different amount for the perpetual care fund? It isn't
That's correct.
included in the 600.
600 for the,
No,
and 300 for the perpetual.
And 300, that, yeah.
correct.
So it is different.
Those are the numbers.
It's not together.
But you pay for it at the same time.
Right, but, so it would actually make $900 per plot as of right now.
Yep.
Right.
Correct.
And that's what you calculated, Nate, in your general fund revenue sale plus the burial, right?
Yeah, so the burial in our cemetery right now, we have, it's a time of need. So you pay the $400 for the opening and closing on a weekday. So that the sale is $600. The opening and closing, the interment is $400. And then the perpetual care is $300.
So I just wanted, thanks for doing that. I wanted Nate to do that analysis just so we could see what projection-wise we might be able to expect from the sale of the plots as well, too.
So tell me where I'm missing 817 plots times 900 per plot is $735,000, not $1,060,000.
So
So the
the,
300 is going to a different place than the 600.
I'm just looking at the total.
yeah, so the general fund revenue, the sale plus burial, is the $600 plus the interment fee of $400, the opening and closing.
So he's considering 1,300 times 817.
And then the perpetual care revenue, because it goes to a different fund, I separated it, so it is $300 times that.
No, okay, I was trying to get to the,
No, yeah, we did fail
Why
to
would
mention,
we- why
Councilmember
would we-
Ince, the $400. You're right.
why
But
would
it's in there on the left.
it's in there on the left.
In the
So
box.
when you look at the left, if we open and close, it's 400. If it's Saturday, it's 600 to open and close. So Nate was considering that 400 in the 817.
So he was doing 1,000 and then
And-
the perpetual care.
And Councilmember Ince, I'm assuming, Nate, that you've rounded up, it's probably 816 point something, 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 and maybe that's why your number doesn't actually
Yeah.
show 817,000.
816.75,
Yeah, I guess.
I rounded up to 817.
I guess I'm not sure why we're including in plot revenue the charge to open and close the grave. That's the cost of employees doing the work. Now, maybe it's not, maybe there's some excess in there that can go into the revenue, but it would seem like we're mixing apples and oranges.
So it's general fund revenue, so when you look at the line item, and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but the cemetery revenue, it all goes into that same account. So if we were to sell 817 plots today, you would see 816,000 in our general fund cemetery revenue line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you've also, so on sale of most graves, historically, there isn't an open and close fee because historically, we haven't been in a position of immediate use. And even today, if you have a person come in and their spouse has died and they get two, they pay for two, but they only pay for one open and close. So I have trouble including the opening and closing fee with the general revenue. It doesn't make sense. Because we're in effect going to pay employees to do that. Now, I don't know how much it costs to open and close a grave, but we're including as an offset to the $7 million revenues for opening and closing the grave. And
I agree with you, Councilmember Ince. I agree with that logic. I mean, the $400 is going towards the employee cost, the operational cost of operating the cemetery, whether you collect that on the day of purchasing the space or if you collect it later on. You do have some people prepay essentially because they're taking advantage of today's dollars, right? And instead of future dollars. But I get what you're saying. So what you're saying, you want to keep the offset of the bond separate from that of our operational of maintaining the cemetery. We wouldn't include keeping the maintenance or keeping the grass cut in this at all because it's separate. That's a separate operational cost. So I understand your logic, and I think that's, Nate, I think that's a simple fix that we remove that to show, again, I guess you're looking for ROI in a way. Is that right, Councilmember Ince?
not even looking for your ROI, just does it have the ability to pay for itself?
Sure. I think the logic is sound, and I don't think that's difficult to remove that opening and closing because again, that is an operational cost, not necessarily a revenue from a direct benefit from the $7 million. That's a separate item. I think it's great.
I agree with Bill on that. I mean, you have
That's
a
great.
pretty good historical track record of what your sales are but opening and closing is definitely a variable that I wouldn't want to use in that calculation.
Well, then we could look at what an actual cost is, opening and closing.
Sure.
It's the correct accounting approach with it. You're right, Councilman Ince. Because you're looking at the sale of plots and the perpetual cares, the revenues you're raising. Then you're looking at when you charge, whenever you're charging when they open a grave, and you have to offset that against expenses.
Yeah.
That's why we're making that charge, to offset expenses of our help.
Yeah, so
And
that's why I
equipment
combine
and-
them, because it goes into the same revenue account. But I understand your logic as well, and I think it would be beneficial to separate it so you can see the difference, so.
I like both representations though, Nate. I think it's good to understand, for us on accounting side, on the finance side, to know what that impact is, but we also maybe have a separate kind of formula separating that out to understand the bond impact and the revenue that's generated from the bond's impact. So those two are treated differently. But I think what you've presented gives that overview of how the fund operates, but now we can get more specific on the impact from the bond.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else you want to add, Nate?
No, anything else for me?
Thanks for doing that, putting that together.
No problem.
We have discussion on that.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to item number 2. Let's go to the CDBG grant application for ADA pedestrian ramps. Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. The city has applied to Davis County for some CDBG grant funds for ADA ramp projects. We did this, I think, back in 2019, and we're just asking for some additional funds from Davis County to do some ADA ramps, about 18 ramps near 400 East. And as part of that application process, the county requested that we have a resolution or some indication from the governing body that you are in support of, number one, our ADA ramp project that staff is recommending, and number two, that you are in support of applying for these funds. So staff recommends approval of this resolution so that we can continue our application process with Davis County for these funds and move forward with the ADA ramp project.
And if we approve this resolution, do we have a turnaround on when the funds would be available and the project would start?
Yeah, it's actually pretty quick here. It's already been approved. We've been approved for 75,000. We have a 75,000 match that will come out of our transportation, out of that sidewalk line. We already budgeted for that. That's why we have 150,000 sitting in there.
And 150 gets us how many ADA sidewalk
That gets us
improvements?
that will get us the 18.
Just the 18, okay.
Yeah, that's the 18. And the turnaround is we should have these funds by, I believe it's this winter, so we could start the projects this spring. So it'll be in this fiscal year.
What percentage of our intersections are ADA compliant?
I don't know, Mike, do you know the number?
I saw
know
Kevin
it's pretty low.
start
It's pretty
thinking back
low.
there. You know, Kevin?
The problem is the ADA standards change quite often, and so as they change, some people say, wait a minute, you just changed this ped ramp 10 years ago. Well, as the ADA changes, we have to update our standards. So, I mean, if I had to throw a number at it, I would say maybe half or maybe a third. But as we rebuild streets, overlay streets, we're required to update them to the current standard. This grant helps us so that we're not spending transportation monies replacing ped ramps.
So if I can ask for a data point, when we do our review of the sidewalk maintenance and the expenditures on that, if we can add what our compliance level is citywide to current as a percentage, so that we know how far we've got to go. Because we did that when we did the authorization for sidewalks. We talked about we had the sidewalk survey and the number of miles. It would be good if we knew how many areas in the city are still impacted. And I would be curious to know which standard that they're actually compliant with. If we have some that are absolutely not ADA compliant at all, higher priority, obviously, that sort of thing, just so we can see as an overlay what that looks like.
Yeah, we have some areas where there's no ramp at all. We have other areas that met our earlier, maybe 1991 standard. And then we have those that are up to the current standard. So there's probably 3 or 4 different levels of where these ramps are at. I think Mark Marchant, that might be something that he could inventory and put together a report on.
I think it'd be great. Thank you.
So I drove down 4th East yesterday, I think it was yesterday, when I went over to inspect the park damage. And there are some ADA ramps being repaired, retrofitted, involved in the 4th East. Are any of these 18 included in the 4th East project, or are these 18 independent of the rebuild projects?
These are independent. There were several ped ramps, I know, down on Pitford Drive that were replaced in anticipation of reconstructing that road next year. So we don't like to have the crews on top of each other. We try to get out ahead. I do think there were some on the previous section of 4th East that may have been done with the CDBG grant. I'd have to check with Mark, but typically we're trying to get out maybe a year ahead of those overlays and street rebuilds so that we have, typically it's a separate contractor that's coming in and doing the ped ramps, and we don't want them on top of each other. The CDBG only goes so far, so we do still have to use transportation monies when we, for example, up on 4th East, all of that is being, all those ped ramps are being completed with transportation funds.
How many times do we end up ripping out a ramp that we just replaced because there was damage during the road repair? Is that common?
No, they're pretty careful. They can scrape up against a curb and gutter with an excavator and not damage that curb and gutter. So unless there's an accident of somebody accidentally driving over a ped ramp, we're pretty safe to mill an overlay up against it or excavate against it without damaging the ped ramp.
Just for everybody's information, they're really slick. The newest ones are really slick to step on. If it's cold and it's frozen, they freeze. And
So it becomes more of a ramp rather than
right,
an ADA ramp?
right. So just
Oh, so this is not a sincere comment.
and as a frequent user of that ramp, the new ones they put in on Main Street are slick as can be. If there's a skiff of snow or even if it gets really cold, they kind of freeze and they're kind of, have to use a lot of salt on their ramp when I get there in the morning.
Good to know.
Who do we talk to about
Just a
that?
little information for your information.
Need some skid guards on them, huh?
Yeah.
So who puts out the standards and how do we get feedback to them that the current standard isn't working? Because that doesn't
Typically-
sound like it's an ADA compliant thing. I mean, that's not helpful if it becomes a slide.
So American Disabilities Act, they are the kind of governing board. Typically, we take our details from UDOT. So when UDOT updates their standard, we kind of know, hey, we better take a look at our standard and make sure we're up to date. But there are the truncated domes that we use are plastic. There are other truncated domes that are blocks or bricks that also comply. So that's just a thought that we could switch to, it's more of a brick instead of a plastic truncated dome. That also meets the ADA standard. And that's something we could take a look at.
Seems like there'd be some cost differential in the material selection like you're talking about, but I wouldn't think it'd be much. And I agree with Robin. I've been on a couple of those, and when they're slick, I mean, they're not a great surface if you're moving at any speed.
Yeah, I think it's something we could maybe do a test section on and see how they perform and see if we want to update our standard to they're kind of a brick truncated dome.
Do you want to volunteer?
That would be good.
Sorry, I didn't want to throw any wrenches in there. I just wanted people
Sure
to
you
be
did.
aware that this is a little slick out there.
And I don't think the cost is any different. I think they're similar in cost, so that's something we could take a look at.
Well,
That
it
sounds
seems,
great.
Okay,
I would think you should probably do the motion since you've given him such a hard time.
You want to do the motion, or should I?
Go ahead.
I'd make a motion that we approve Resolution 2021-32 for the CBDG grants for the for the ADA ramps.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Meekum?
Aye.
Councilman McEwen?
Aye.
Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Councilman Ivy.
Aye.
Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. All right, let's go to municipal code amendments, golf carts. Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. At your last meeting, you requested staff to come back with an ordinance addressing golf carts. In the 2020 legislative session, the legislature allowed municipalities to permit golf carts within their jurisdiction. So essentially, the state is saying it's up to you, local government, if you want to allow golf carts. But if you do, you need to provide sufficient parameters on allowing golf carts. And they say that we can regulate which highways in the city they can use, who can operate them, you know, age, operation, hours that they can be operated. So given the parameters of the state law, essentially we have to adopt an ordinance to allow golf carts. We do not have a golf course in the city, but so in looking at some other ordinances of other communities, sometimes they would say you have to take the quickest path to the golf course, things like that. I just went ahead and said, look, you can ride a golf cart on any city street that is posted for 25 miles an hour or less, so that's essentially residential streets. And I added in some other parameters just in doing a little bit of research. I will say that I tried to be as comprehensive and conservative as possible. I have not given the time limitation of getting this back to you. I haven't had an opportunity to discuss the parameters with any other department heads. So if you would like to discuss this and table it for further staff input, that's certainly welcome. This is just a draft for you to consider. But for instance, so I just used the state statute definition of a golf cart, what's a golf cart and what's not a golf cart. And then some of the parameters, as I said, only on residential streets or any street, 25 miles an hour or less. Anyone 18 years of age or over. Initially I had 16, and then I had, well, you need to have a driver's license to at least know how to do the hand signals, because most golf carts don't have blinkers. But I do think that given the language in the statute, we are likely preempted from regulating registration, insurance, and driver's license. So I decided to just go with the 18 years of age. You might, you know, if you want to reduce that, feel free. I also put in here that they should only be driven during daylight hours. You have to, you know, you can't have more passengers than the golf cart is designed for, and that it should have minimal safety equipment, like a rear view mirror and reflectors. Again, I think we're likely preempted from regulating any kind of insurance. I had an insurance provision in here saying that you need to have your own insurance, but I took that out and just have a liability clause that, you know, it can be dangerous and you are doing this at your own risk. And also that they have to comply with traffic laws, which likely is just similar to a bicycle. So, and any kind of violation of this ordinance would be limited to a traffic violation likely. So that's just.
So Lisa, you just made a good point. You said similar to a bicycle. So if I have a golf cart and I go out on Main Street where the road speed is 40, can I drive on that road?
Again, I did not have a lot of time to do research, but I believe that the state doesn't allow golf carts on state roads. So initially I said, you can't do it on Main Street, you can't do it on Parish, you can't do it, you know. So, but a lot of ordinances say you can cross those streets. So, because obviously you're not going to get anywhere if it's just 25 miles an hour. So the way this is drafted though is, no, you couldn't drive on Main Street because it's posted for more than 25 miles an hour. Some ordinances went into a lot more discussion about crossing, and that you have to cross safely and you can't cross at an angle and you can't ride along the street. And I just didn't really want to get into regulating any use of streets that are not within our jurisdiction, which is Main Street, Parish, you know, frontage, et cetera. So again, I just didn't even try to regulate that. I just said you can do city streets, but you can cross the big ones.
I get that. I was just homing in on the bicycle because in a lot of cases, bicycles will use their lane, they'll use the full road, and then sometimes they'll be on the sidewalk. So I just
Well,
want
yeah,
to make
that's the
sure.
question is, can they go on a sidewalk? I don't know. Those are some of the questions that you'll have to, if they're treated like a bicycle, can they go on the sidewalk? You know, hopefully not, but I think you could also say not on the sidewalk, but we can certainly do more research. It sounds like the chief was moving up, so I'd love to hear his take on this as well.
Bounding one seat at a time to the front.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this quite a bit and asking around, getting some different opinions. So as far as the bicycle goes, a bicycle can be operated on a sidewalk. Now, the state law makes kind of a differentiation if you're 18 years of age or older, and there's some kind of regulation in place disallowing that. So the idea is kids can ride their bikes on a sidewalk, but once you become an adult, stay off the sidewalk. That's kind of the intent that I can see there with the legislature. So the way the state code is written and the way the proposed ordinance is written, unless there was some kind of language in there that says you cannot operate on the sidewalk, we would probably have to allow them to ride on the sidewalk, the way it's currently written without a separate ordinance that would disallow that. So I would highly recommend that if you decide to adopt an ordinance such as this, that we disallow it for operation on a sidewalk. So bicycles have to comply with pretty much all traffic regulations that a car does. There are some uniqueness to them that are inherent to a bicycle. But generally speaking, they're required to abide by all the rules. Of course, they don't have to have a driver's license and insurance and other things, but with the state code allowing golf carts on municipal roadways, if an ordinance allows that, a local ordinance, you have a lot of flexibility there on where they can be driven and so on, as mentioned here. As I've explored this topic and thought about it more, I'm really uncomfortable with it, allowing the golf carts on the road. Under the description of a golf cart, it could be a three-wheel vehicle. Oftentimes you think of a four-wheel, but there are three wheels, which to me are much less stable. I think about 1825 North, the steep hill there, and other areas of the city where we might have some steepness, 600 South area. And you put a three-wheel vehicle on there, I could see some issues with that. There are no turn signals. You can get some speed out of them if you turn off a regulator on them. I'm told they can go pretty fast going downhill. So I have some concerns about it. Right now, when I initially was thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, we got hoverboards out there, we got motor-assisted scooters running around, we got little kids on little toy cars that are motorized running around, which I think is really unsafe. And so it seems like we're just allowing more and more and different types of vehicles and so forth on the roadways. We don't have a golf course here, and that seems to me to be probably a more compelling reason to allow it, so that people can drive their golf cart from their house to a golf course down the street a little ways. So I'm uncomfortable with it. I would not recommend adopting this ordinance. If we did move forward with it, as the ordinance states, crossing Main Street would be not allowed because that is a state road. I'd be uncomfortable with them on any roads over 25-mile-an-hour zone. And, I think I'd have a little bit of a problem even just crossing 400 East up here because of the higher speed. The brakes aren't, I'm told, I'm not a golfer, and I don't ride around in golf carts very often. I used to, and I did security up at Lagoon, but I'm told that the brakes aren't super great on them.
They're not.
It's going downhill and so forth. I've seen lots of videos of them tipping over, and you get a few people inside. I don't know how stable they're going to be. I just think it's an issue that we could be finding ourselves having some injuries and conflicts with traffic. So that's my opinion on it. I don't see it as a huge deal, but if we can keep it within reason in neighborhoods, low speed limits, it's probably not going to be a big deal. Now, you know, with traffic laws, with the exception of, you know, probably DUI, reckless driving, things like that, officers on a routine basis exercise discretion all the time. I mean, that's why the state doesn't allow photo radar. They want an officer to go up and make contact with a person and get an explanation, and maybe there's some mitigating factors going on or whatever. And so an officer often uses discretion, especially when it comes to traffic. Officers drive around every day. They see stuff going on all the time. If we tried to stop every single violation we saw, we'd never get from point A to point B, because there's just a lot of violations going on. So you kind of have to make discretionary decisions in your traffic enforcement. If I see someone going down a road in a subdivision and they're going from this house 3 downs down to that house, and they're driving a golf cart and they're going really slow, I might just go, oh, that's not a big deal. I use discretion to not really do anything about it. If I see him flying down the road and driving a little bit recklessly, or a young kid driving or something, yeah, I'll stop him and say, hey, it's against the law. So if we make an ordinance that allows it to do it, it kind of takes that tool away from us.
So I'm hearing, Chief, that you're not in favor of it, but would you be in favor of it if it was a situation, they're not crossing 400 East, they're not crossing Main, they're not crossing, you know?
I don't know that I'd actually be in favor of it. I may not be very opposed to it.
Not as opposed.
Under those situations, but I don't think I would be in favor of it.
Seems like it's almost a self-regulating issue. I have the similar concerns. I don't know what the battery packs weigh, but I think you're 800 pounds for that vehicle, and you've got something that's potentially loses control pretty easily. I think it'd be really hard to kind of create almost like if you will, a fireworks map that says in these zones you can drive it, but here you can't, and have that be enforceable.
Right.
So I see your point on that. I'm not prepared to vote on it one way or another. I mean, there sounds like there could be some more research done on it. And I don't know, I'm not sure that it's ready for prime time, because things like the bicycle definition, this issue of safe operation and where it would be safe to operate it, seems to be something we want to get more information on.
Yeah, maybe look at are there other cities that are doing it, and what kind of issues are they having?
Cities that don't have golf courses would
Yeah.
be the ones I'd be really interested in.
Right.
How much time would staff need to appropriately research this?
Lisa?
How busy
Sorry
is
about
your
that.
calendar?
You could sit out in front
Yeah,
of my
lack
house
of-
and watch.
This is when you need an intern, huh?
Hey,
Yeah, Tammy?
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
oh, sorry about that. Babysitter issues tonight, so you probably heard my kids in the background. But I was just going to say, I agree with George, but also would add that it's worth continuing to gather that information. The way I view it is that this is, another user of the road, that people get around in different ways, right? And so it's not just a blanket no, but what are the issues and can we mitigate for them and how can we deal with them? We have people who walk, we have people who run, we have people on bikes, we might have people on other kinds of vehicles. And so I would want to further explore. The other thing that's a little bit tricky that I'd like to be considered is Maybe we can talk about this when we get more into the nuance. But there are just, as the chief said, so many different kinds of these, other kinds of vehicles that drive different speeds and do different things, right? And so there are some that can go very, very fast and get driven by young people in a very dangerous way on our roads. And then yet a golf cart can barely putter along, right? So let's keep looking at it though. Thank you.
I agree with you, Tammy. That's a great point about the differing modes of transportation, and if we build out potentially the west side with, possibility of more density or rail stops or, bus rapid or something, a golf cart shuttle or something might be a reality. So we might as well prepare for that sort of thing now. But I really think we do need more staff research on it. So I don't want to bring it back before you think it's adequate timing. So I'm really looking for suggestions.
I would add, I agree with, after reading it, I agree with all of I do think it, during the day is the safe time because most of them don't have lights. I agree with the 25 mile an hour speed limit. I drive a lot of golf carts. I've never driven one that would go more than, doesn't ever go as fast as I want to on the golf course, so, of course, I have to go a long ways in between balls because I'm such a good golfer, so I need to be able to go faster. I am concerned with the age. I know Lisa's being overly conservative on that. After watching the discussion when the state passed it, they actually chose not to put an age because it is younger people that are using them, but if you put an age under 16, which would probably be the more users, you're putting your officers in a dilemma as to, are they gonna, I have a 13-year-old grandson that's 6'1", and I have a 18-year-old granddaughter that's only 4'8". So, you'd probably not pick him up, but you'd pick her up. So I would say we need to look at the age limit and maybe just say something more like physically can handle driving the golf cart. Because they've got to be, you're not going to have a 5-year-old who can't sit on the seat and reach the gas pedal. But
I think that the counterpoint to that argument, though, is as 18, you have legal responsibility for your actions. So if you have somebody less than 18 and they, let's pick worst scenario, they unlock the brakes and they kill somebody, that was a horrible thing that happened, but where's the legal jeopardy? Or there isn't really any because they're youth.
It goes to their parents, the same as a bicycle. A bicycle's going to go way faster than a golf cart. If a bicycle hits you, they could be doing a lot faster than, but like I said, just listening to what the state had to say, they didn't seem to be too concerned about the age as long as you were able to
I think it's worthy of, I think it's worthy of staff debate and see what you get from the collection of the staff.
Yeah, and honestly, I've gone both ways on it. I've kind of went, it's not a big deal, but then more I've thought about it, I'd be concerned.
So what I'm hearing is we'd like to table for tonight, right, and allow staff to look at it.
Yeah, but I'm looking for a time window for how long we want to table.
I would say a month. What do you think? Not the next council meeting, but the next one, or?
About 2 months.
Okay, I would motion that we table the municipal code amendments or ordinance 2021-17 referencing golf carts for 2 calendar months to be brought back after that period.
What if we added in if you were able to get it done before that?
Yes.
That you could
Like to
bring it back
overachieve, so
sooner.
that
We would like you to overachieve.
Appreciate that.
So,
Just in case other things come up.
Okay, so no sooner than 2 months unless staff is overachieving.
Second
Now
that.
it's expected.
Motion to second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And Lisa's a great overachiever, so I'm not worried.
That's why she told us 2, because she was planning on 1.
Let's go to the minutes review and acceptance. This is of the July 8th, the July 20th, and the July 8th closed session, the July 20th work session, July 20th city council minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Let's go to city council report. Tonight's turn, it's Councilwoman Ivy.
Okay, I have very little to report on because the museum takes July off for their meeting. But the exciting thing is that the museum phone tour, the outside tour, I don't know how many of you have Have any of you taken the opportunity to try that out?
No, but I'd like to.
We did approve that some time ago. They went live on the 1st of May. And if you go over there, you'll see little stands with a plaque on each one. And it has a QR code that you can scan or the phone number you can call. And then it has the numbers of the stations and the name of each story. So as you move around the outside of the museum, you've got different stories you can hear. If you'd like the phone number for that, I'm happy to give it to you. There are, I believe, 23 stories recorded that you can listen to, and they're just short, but I've had such a good time learning more about Centerville. All the way from medicinal and dyeing herbs that they used for cloth and medicine to tragic airplane crashes in the past. It's been really amazing to listen to that. And the numbers for it, I didn't think that it would be that big a deal. I mean, the museum hasn't been, it's only open on Tuesdays, and so there's not our expectation of people showing up every day to the museum. But we've had 98 individual users who have scanned the QR code and listened to them, as well as 18 people who have called the phone number. So that's just since the beginning of May. So I was really pleased that it's having a great impact.
And it's only open one day a week, but the
Well,
QR code's open every day.
The museum is only open one day a week, but this is exterior to the museum, so you can go whenever you want.
That's right.
And I think that really increases the availability of the history of Centerville to everybody, regardless of their schedules.
And not many people probably know about it yet, so
Right.
that's really.
So I was really
Had that many
surprised that
people.
there have been so many.
That's cool.
As far as the gardens are concerned, they look beautiful, but they're having the same problem as your garden probably is at home, which is that the nights are too warm for blossoms to set fruit. So there's a lot of foliage and it looks pretty, but not a lot of produce right now. So that's my report.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ivy. Very good report.
One more thing. The air conditioning went out in the museum about a week ago. So they had to cancel their users that had scheduled meetings at the museum for today and last week. But the new air conditioner has arrived and they'll be able to reschedule those.
I was gonna say, I think we have a number of air conditioning maintenance companies who located right in Centerville. Are they giving us any kind of deal or donations?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I think it ran about $3,400 out of the museum's wrap tax, which I was kind of sad to see them have to divert the money, but the warranty on the air conditioner wasn't such that it could be under the warranty, and the differential between getting it repaired and getting a new one with a 10-year warranty was not very much. So they chose to go with a new one
Thank you.
with the warranty.
Item number 6, Mayor's Report. So I continue to put drought ideas on here because back in June, when I first brought this up of our water concern, and we had the great discussion that it's something that's ongoing that we need to be aware of. So I hope that staff is continuing to work on putting blurbs out there about drought ideas. So a couple other things I want to report to you is in my rounds of going around to the businesses through our cities, which I do on a regular basis, I stopped by 7-Eleven, and they have a new owner down at 7-Eleven, and the old owner, who was a Centerville resident, sold, and they have a new owner down there, and they introduced him to the chief through email, and told the chief to go down and see him. I was at a dinner the other night, and the displaced residents from the mobile home. There was one of the widows that was there, and as we sat by her, she said that she was doing well and she was enjoying her new surroundings. So once again, I appreciate all the hard work that people went through throughout the city to help these displaced residents. And other than that, I don't have more to report on tonight, so we'll go to the city manager's report. Bran, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep mine short. Again, I'll just out of town. I just want to let you know this might be item of interest to this council. 2 or 3 weeks ago, Chief and I had a conversation regarding police department wages and staffing. And I proposed to the chief that we delay the $48,000 study to determine if we need more officers and divert that funding to increasing pay raises for the officers. Chief, I'll speak for the chief if that's okay, but yeah, Chief agreed that that's the direction we'd like to go. So what we have Jake doing is he's starting his analysis of looking at the compensation for officers throughout the state and in particular areas, and then we'll be coming back with a proposal. The thought is going forward, we'll, instead of hiring Mike Swallow, who I love and I think he's great, we have Jake, who's very capable, that once a year, maybe we'll just look at each department and see where they are compensation study-wise, and that way we save ourselves some money. But we could just look at each department individually each year, but right now we need to focus on our police department. So I just thought that might be of interest to all of you to know. So we'll be proposing or bringing something forward for your approval regarding compensation for our officers.
Brent, are we expanding our range outside of the comps for Davis County? Are we picking a reasonable driving distance like all of Salt Lake Valley and the police departments there? I mean, I think one of the things that has hamstrung us in the past is that our comps are not actually the area that we're really competing against, because West Valley and Salt Lake have had such substantial increases for their base pay of their officers. I feel that that's our competition.
Well, I'll quote a council member who shared something a couple of years ago, that there are other intrinsic benefits of a job besides just the pay. But yeah, to answer your question, Councilor McEwen, there is a need to expand our search. The cities that we've used previously for our compensation study, I don't believe are indicative or truly, it gives us a sense, just because you have the same population does not necessarily say that's who we're competing against. But also keep in mind, it's kind of we're in no way are we ever going to compete against the pay against Salt Lake, West Valley, or Ogden. You're just not. Different types of environments, different type of work. We have a great culture here. People want to be here in Centerville. You'll have people that might leave for the money, but there is something of value of being part of the Centerville Police Department. But at the same time, I've said it before, I want to make sure our officers are paid fairly. We can't necessarily compete, but I want to make sure they're paid fairly and appreciated and show they're appreciated for what they do for the city, just like any of our other employees. So again, we're not going to offer more than some of those other cities, but we just need to kind of understand. What I worry about in every department, particularly the police department, is our leapfrogging that we tend to do, where an officer, police department will increase their pay and then we have to increase ours, and then we just keep leapfrogging. But again, just want to make sure we take care of our officers. And so we'll be bringing something forward for your, not necessarily approval, but consideration. And then we'd like to get some input from you as well. But with that, there has been talk about delaying potentially 2 more officers in the future as well, because we want to focus on our existing staffing.
Brad, will you look at part of that study at obviously get a large sample size of cities similar to our size and our makeup and our culture? I mean, is that a fair assessment that you would include that in your study?
Yeah, so there's a lot of demographics or information that we'll take into account, and you're welcome as a council to tweak or add or delete from. But again, I just think that that's one item we're working on that I think that you might be of interest in, and Chief and I will present that in the near future.
Thank you. Any more?
That's all I have right now, Mr. Mayor. Nope, I'll end there.
Okay. If not, nothing else on the agenda, so I'll look for a motion to go to closed session, not to return to city council meeting.
Given the tenor of our start, I'm not prepared to motion to go into a closed session for any purpose other than the discussion of purchase of real property. And I would motion that we go into closed meeting to discuss that with no intent to return to the public session, with a 10-minute break before we convene the closed session.
I'm for the break.
I don't understand.
I think that we've got 2 issues here. One is we have a real property discussion we need to have, the character and competency, but character and competency opens up too many things right now. I don't want to open up anything character or competency. I want to keep us strictly to the business at hand. Brant, since you're part of that character and competency, I recognize this as part of the performance evaluation. Are you opposed to moving that to a future meeting?
I am at the will of the council. Whatever the council decides, I will accept. Is that a good enough deflection?
That is perfect deflection. Well played, sir, well played.
September, next time.
So what's the motion,
The
Councilman?
motion is
Repeat it
to
again.
go into closed session for the purposes of discussing the lease, exchange, or purchase of real property with no intent to return to public session, and a 10-minute break before we convene the closed session.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Council's adjourned.